Putin designed a plan to collapse America, what would it look like? And I think it's pretty straightforward. It's a kind of a four-step process that's fairly easily identified. Number one, install a puppet or an ally inside the American government. You know, Lincoln talked about how, you know, if America's ever to be conquered, it's not going to come from outside our country. It's going to come from inside our country. It's going to come from within. And that certainly seems to be the case. And if Putin picked a candidate, it would probably be Trump. And in fact, when you look at the Senate Intelligence Committee findings and you look at the findings of the multiple national intelligence services, there's an absolute agreement right across the board that in 2016, 2020, and even 2024, Putin was trying to help Donald Trump get elected. So that's number one. Number two, dismantle American institutions from the inside. Putin's best move would be to encourage the erosion of U.S. democracy, right? The government capacity. Devalue science, underfund law enforcement, defund agencies, destroy trust in our government, destroy trust in our elections, sabotage our public health. And by the way, all those things are happening right now as you're listening to my voice. Number three, he would stoke internal divisions. A divided America is a weak America. Putin's cyber and propaganda ops have long stoked racial hatred, anti-government sentiment, anti-vax ideology, and far-right extremism. Trump accelerates all of it, and Musk's X has become a major vector for lies, disinformation, propaganda, and fascist apologia. And then fourth, if Putin wanted to destroy America, he would weaken U.S. alliances around the world. And Trump is doing it. He's repeatedly threatened to pull us out of NATO. He's praised Putin's invasion of Ukraine. He undermined Western alliances. And now he's threatening our allies with the possibility of invasion. Greenland, Canada, Panama, Mexico. This is textbook Kremlin strategy. Divide the West and then conquer its influence. But, you know, whether Trump and Musk are taking direct instructions from Putin, and there are a bunch of people out there who think they are, who are pointing to these regular phone conversations over the last 2 years that both Trump and Musk have been having with Putin. But whether that's the case or not, the consequence is the same. The destruction they're inflicting on America is strategic, not accidental, coordinated, not chaotic, and oligarchic, not populist. This is a very straightforward process. You know, it could be that they're doing it because Putin told them to. It could be because this is part of the Dark Enlightenment. You know, the Curtis Yarvin crowd, the broligarchy, the tech bros, who just want to wipe out. You know, they think that we should have a CEO America rather than a democracy, or if it's people trying to wipe out the institution that might challenge their exercise of raw power. It doesn't matter. The outcome is the same. They're taking down our democracy. And I mean, they're quite literally tearing our government apart as we speak. And yeah, for example, they just in the last 2 months, right? They have or are in the process of gutting the IRS so badly the country will lose an estimated $500 billion to morbidly rich tax cheats, killing off the EPA so polluters can run free and profit from giving us cancer, disbanded the public integrity section that once prosecuted corrupt politicians, shut down the DOJ unit that was prosecuting violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, moved the ATF under Kash Patel's purview with the goal of neutering it, crippling the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau that stops big banks and insurance companies from ripping off average people. They've taken a hatchet to NASA, presumably to hand more power and money to SpaceX. They're dismantling the Department of Education to create more demand for private for-profit schools. They're paralyzing the Department of Health and Human Services that protects us from disease and pandemics. They're mutilating the National Labor Relations Board that protects workers' rights. They're proclaiming their intention to end FEMA so Americans are on their own when climate change-driven disasters strike. They're tearing apart the Social Security Administration so seniors will have to rely on big banks for retirement options. They're demolishing the National Institutes of Health that develops new drugs and cures for disease. They've seized control of the FCC so they can end net neutrality and try to dictate content of radio and TV programming. They're stripping NOAA of its workers, so we'll have to rely on for-profit companies for our weather reports and storm warnings. They're kneecapping the Department of Transportation to block new public transportation projects and deregulate big trucking companies and self-driving cars, like Teslas. They're ripping up the Department of Energy so it can't fund any more green energy projects. They're wiping out the Department of Housing and Urban Development to prevent any new low-income housing projects. They're attacking the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to leave Americans defenseless. They've largely ended the Office of Civil Rights within the Department of the Department of Education to enforce anti-discrimination laws in education. They've defunded the National Institute of Justice that works against terrorism and far-right extremism. They're eviscerating the Department of Veterans Affairs and other programs that help our veterans, including shutting down the suicide prevention hotlines. They've defunded the Department of Agriculture to gut food stamps and SNAP, school lunch programs, and supports for small family farms. They're paralyzing the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board that oversees the executive branch to make sure that their anti-terrorism efforts don't violate civil rights. They're weakening the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, the EEOC, so it can't do its job of protecting minority or disabled workers and job applicants. And they're firing scientists at the FDA, gutting oversight of drug manufacturers. And that's just a partial so far list. Meanwhile, Trump is snatching students off the streets and transporting them to a brutal private for-profit prison in Louisiana with no due process whatsoever, in clear defiance of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. He's proposing changes to voting laws that will prevent tens of millions of married women from casting a ballot. And he's threatening to seize foreign sovereign lands by force. So, who's driving this train? Well, there's three factions, basically. First, there's Trump himself, who's so pissed off at the government for nearly throwing him into prison that, anything that makes government workers squeal in pain is something that delights him. Then comes Musk and the so-called PayPal mafia, who don't think women should be allowed to vote, that capitalism and democracy are incompatible with each other, and have fantasies, apparently, of ruling over a whites-only ethno-nationalist state run like a corporation. And finally, there's the old-fashioned right-wing billionaires who for 50 years have been building the infrastructure that's facilitating all this, the media infrastructure, the judicial, the legal infrastructure, the think tanks, all of this stuff. So what do we do about this? Well, you've got a neutered Congress. You've got the courts that are 50-50 kind of, half of the judges in the country have been appointed by Republicans. And you've got an executive branch that's been absolutely captured by a fascist. So what's left? Public opinion. That's pretty much it. It's you and me. 2 minutes. And that's where Saturday is going to be a big deal this week, as I mentioned at the beginning of this program. This is going to be a really big week. And Saturday, there are protests in every city in America. There's over 600 of them planned. And this is going to be a major big deal. The goal of these protests is to make it clear that public opinion is no longer with these guys, with the hopes that not only will this embolden and strengthen the spines of Democrats, but it might cause some Republicans to say, this is political suicide going down this road. So, tag your end.